Well, the news in the college football world today is that the Associated Press released its preseason top 25 college football rankings. So, those are the rankings that we will be using come game one for the Mountaineers. So, not a ranked on ranked matchup, unfortunately, to tout because the Mountaineers didn't get into those top 25. I think maybe what hurts the most out of the news of the day is that West Virginia, like how it is starting out in the USA Today coaches poll, is that West Virginia is 33rd. So, for someone who took the time and created a top 25 poll and went game by game a week ago and said that West Virginia could finish 9-3 to end the regular season, it kind of ticks me off. But this is part of the course as in the plight of a Mountaineer fan. And that we have to just harbor those feelings, unfortunately, of ill will toward the national and Big 12 media, and harness it. I don't want to take the time out of tonight and for this show's purposes to get on my soapbox and belabor the point about West Virginia being a top 25 program. But I do want to take this time to just hit on it for just a second because this is the news of today in college football. In addition to camp continuing into its second week, and thankfully, praise God, West Virginia hasn't had a C.J. Baxter-esque injury like Texas had this past week, in which its star running back goes down for the entire season. So already another one bites the dust. But for the cases of a team like Texas that can simply reload better than a program like West Virginia, who has to rebuild, it's not as big of a deal for a team like Texas for the Associated Press to drop them out of, say, the top 10 per se. But maybe that's why they picked Oregon. But it just comes down to the simple fact, as a Mountaineer fan, you wish that West Virginia, and it did to a certain extent after really the glory years in the mid-2000s, where as the Big East was kind of crumbling, looking back on this, as I kind of did the research over the late spring, that you can think back to like the 2008, 2009, 2010 years, is that really the national media was giving the benefit of the doubt to West Virginia teams, maybe when it necessarily didn't, to stay in the top 25. Now that has really changed, especially over the course of the Neal Brown era from 2019. Now, one could argue West Virginia hasn't necessarily deserved it at any point, even going back to the end of last season, finishing with 9 wins. So you would like to have that benefit of the doubt, really just for national program and brand prestige, is the more times this flying WV logo is out in front of the faces of the masses, that's a good thing for the program. That's great. You want West Virginia to be talked about positively to all people of walks of life all across these grand 50 states and all across the world. So you wish you had that. But at the same time, and this is a constant theme that I've talked about on this program, is that West Virginia is going to have to play David much better than they do as Goliath. And they do perform whenever they do so. Thinking back to some of the greatest years in West Virginia football history, it's when West Virginia is on the outside looking in, being counted out, that West Virginia performs its best. Now, we don't need to necessarily have Charles Wesley Godwin get up there and, scream, "You're picked 14th, you're picked 14th," as was the message in 2023. But West Virginia should have 33 on their locker room, in the weight room, this and that. Use that, harness that motivation come August 31st against Penn State and throughout the rest of this 2024 season, and disrupt people's years. I hate the term spoiler because there are endless possibilities for this season. So spoiler almost takes into consideration you're out of it and you're just trying to ruin other people's seasons. Like, I think Pitt is the ultimate spoiler. Never have any sort of expectations to do anything well, but they'll ruin somebody else's season. So I don't want to be attached to that kind of a label. But that's what West Virginia is going to have to do, is be A team with a chip on its shoulder always assume that you're going to be counted out, not talked about, on the outside looking in of the party, and create your own. Create your own joy, create your own excitement, your own motivation, and go out there and compete each and every week. So that's what I would say to all the fans out there who might necessarily be a little bit disappointed today, feeling disrespected. Oh, I love that card that so many people love to play all the time. Should West Virginia feel disrespected? Well, I mean, yes, but like, what does that mean at the end of the day? Your feelings can be hurt, but people don't really necessarily care about your feelings if you don't go out there and prove them wrong. And for many a times, 2014, 2016, 2018, even last year when West Virginia was right there in the end in November to go on the road to Norman, Oklahoma against an Oklahoma team that was still, kind of getting its footing. Was it necessarily a national contender? No. Was it a pretender? No. So this was an opportunity in West Virginia's last chance, with the Sooners being in the Big 12 conference, to go into a house of horrors, that they played well against in 2021 and almost came up with an upset victory. Finally got that upset victory that had been waiting for over a decade as members of the Big 12 conference. Got the win at Mountaineer Field, but couldn't ultimately get it done down at the Palace on the Prairie. So that's the thing, is West Virginia needs to start proving us fans right rather than continuously upsetting us. So that's what needs to change, to not have like the old label that Clemson seemed to finally break into the 2010s. We need to get over like Clemsoning as a Mountaineer program. But I'll digress. I already spent enough time, I feel like, on this. So kind of where I want to transition, and it was a good segue from talking about this national top 25, is, there were some teams in that, 25 to 33 range that I feel like has no business being ahead of West Virginia. I'm talking about the G5 programs in there, Boise State, Memphis. I'll even count SMU as a team that's rising into the ACC. I still don't understand the love and the fawning over Virginia Tech, a 7-6 program that lost to the worst Rutgers team in over 2 decades. Or not Rutgers, Purdue, but they also lost to Rutgers. Have a lot of returning pieces, but just I think West Virginia is closer to 25th than, say, the early 30s. So, again, it's on West Virginia to go and prove us fans right. So ings I'll have to do it. I'll raise my hand. Yes, call on me. And I'll tell you, and I hope that brings a lot into the forefront from tonight's show, of how good West Virginia's players are on this team. I think everybody needs a fresher. I think everybody's forgotten about little old West Virginia trying to carve its way into the world. A 9-win program from a year ago. Yes, no top 25 wins, but there are studs at each position level, I feel like, where it counts. So let's reintroduce for you these Mountaineers to the national and Big 12 media and compare them to some of the players who are also getting the notoriety across the country, who are getting the benefit of the doubt. Kansas, Arizona, both Kansas schools, Kansas State, Kansas, Oklahoma State, Utah, 5 programs out of the Big 12 that got into the national 2025. So it's just proving that the Big 12 is not having this drastic drop off. Yes, I would agree with some of the other media members out there that if you put a gun to my head right now and said, is a Big 12 team going to win the college football playoff at the end of the day and hold the national championship trophy? No. I don't think that anyone really outside of the top 5, maybe 5, 6 programs in the country, Georgia, Ohio State, Oregon, Texas, Ole Miss, and Alabama, have the kind of talent and depth across their roster to hoist the national championship trophy. Now, it wasn't long ago, 17 years ago, when West Virginia, going almost 19 then, beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl. that it was going to possibly play an Oregon or an Ohio State for a national championship. So West Virginia is not, out of, like, it's not like we're talking about a G5 program, or we're talking about someone who's just come out of the woodwork, say a Wake Forest a couple of years ago trying to contend for an ACC championship. Like, West Virginia is a program that look at their modern era since Don Nehlen came into the fold as the head coach in 1980, and how many times that West Virginia has challenged for a national championship, for conference championships. So we're due. West Virginia is definitely due, and to get there into the conversation. So when you compare to, let's say, Penn State and the power players of the Big 12, that's who I'll kind of compare this to for this program. So starting it off, talking about Garrett Green, the quarterback. He was tremendous this past year in different spurts in time. That he added the kind of dynamics and shot in the arm to a West Virginia offense that had really been identityless under Neal Brown. That you just didn't necessarily know, it wasn't an air raid, it wasn't necessarily a ground and pound, but it was a lot of window dressing. Now, you have to have a mobile quarterback. Brandon Silvers was Neal Brown's best quarterback at Troy because he could make plays happen with his legs, and that's exactly what Garrett Green improvised in 2023. I mean, you can go back to the first touchdown that West Virginia scored on the road at TCU. Drops back, doesn't see anybody open. The whole defense is downfield. He takes off down the left sideline for 35 yards, and everybody's just like, oh my gosh, how is he so fast? He's making, our defenders who are not slow look like, in the dust. So that's the kind of dynamics that he adds this program best, and the toughness that he compounded with it. The game against UCF is the game that I always come back to. Some of the hits that he took in that game and continued to get up and continued to move forward. So, on the year, the knock against Garrett Green has been that completion percentage. And I think it's an overrated thing, y'all. I think talking about this in my last couple of videos, the tale of two seasons, that Neal Brown did not necessarily trust Garrett Green to give him enough leash to go out there and gunsling it. But whenever it necessitated it in the Houston game, he proved himself. Next week against Oklahoma State, fared well. Made some great improvisational plays in that game. I can think back to the touchdown pass that he threw to Devin Carter that's used on some highlight reel videos. Like, he made plays. And you can look by the end of the season, 200 yards per game. So not numbers that really pop off the page per se. 16 passing touchdowns for just 4 interceptions. 200 yards per game. But then when you think about what he added in the rushing statistics too, over 700 yards rushing for the season, almost 800 with 13 rushing touchdowns. So 264 yards per game alone, in a run base heavy offense. I think that was very good. And I think that he can continue to add upon that this year if Neal Brown scales back some of the quarterback design runs a few, opts for and produces more of an up-tempo offense, and we see more out routes, we see more slant routes, we see more post routes, even into the middle deep parts of the field, down the center, getting Cole Taylor involved. I think it all depends upon how defenses scheme against Garrett Green, trying to force him to play from within the pocket, and whether he it's like I've said before, it's hard to cage a lion who is using his strengths to do so well to run. You don't want to stop Garrett Green from running when he can make a dynamic play like the TCU touchdown I just referenced. But at the same time, why not just stay from within the pocket? And if he can develop some rapport with Hudson Clement, with Jaden Bray, with Traylon Ray, with Cole Taylor, and find those easy dink and dunk routes down the field. So that's what I'm looking for more. But I think Garrett Green, at the end of the day, coming back to the theme of this video, is how good are West Virginia's players, that Garrett Green is right up there among the best quarterbacks in the Big 12, who are among the best quarterbacks in the country. When you think about Shedeur Sanders, who might be the #1 overall pick, or at least the first quarterback off the board, up there with a Jackson Dart at Ole Miss, Carson Beck at Georgia, and then going on, and Dylan Gabriel out at Oregon, might be one of the best not necessarily for the NFL, but for college football. Quinn Ewers at Texas. Jalen Daniels at Kansas, and Noah Fafita out at Arizona, Cam Rising at Utah. Like, you can make an argument just as well that Garrett Green has the chops, pound for pound, rushing and offense combined, as talented of a quarterback as any of those guys out there. Now, Shedeur Sanders is more polished as a passer. I will say that. Noah Fafita really lit the world on fire for Arizona and won some big games for Arizona, including beating an Oklahoma team who I know didn't look the same as the Oklahoma team that West Virginia played in the regular season, but still, it's the same, Oklahoma versus, Oklahoma. So, and Arizona got that win. But at the end of the day, 2,400 yards, I think that's definitely beatable for Garrett Green, playing more than just 10.5 games that he played for the Mountaineers, missing the Texas Tech game, really missing the whole Pitt game, only playing for about a half against Duquesne. So if you keep up those rushing numbers, stay around the same thing, if you can have close to 30 touchdowns or more as one quarterback, keep down the turnovers, I think that Garrett Green can very well, by the end of the season, be one of the top 2 quarterbacks in the Big 12. If he continues in his development, in his progression into his 5th year, doesn't turn the ball over, makes good decisions, settles his feet, and completes upwards of 65% is his goal at Big 12 Media Day that he went on the record and saying. So, like where they're at with Garrett Green at quarterback, and I think Nico Marchiol is one of the best backup quarterbacks across the entire country. I actually don't think there's I love hearing the progression that he's making in spring and summer work, getting bigger, faster, stronger, leaner, and learning the nuances to this offense, developing the rapport. I don't think there's that huge, drastic drop-off that, like, you would see at some other places around the country. That I think that Nico Marchiol is highly capable to come in there. And beat Texas Tech this past year at home. I know the weather played a factor into that game, but played well, kept the Mountaineers in the ballgame the entire time, and also beat Oklahoma State on the road as a true freshman. So I wonder how Nico gets involved. Is he more of this spot starter in case Garrett Green gets hurt? Are there certain packages that Neal Brown wants to use him as a part of? I'm sure like how we're going to see with Bo Perbola week 1, backing up Drew Aller, the starter from Penn State. But at the end of the day, I like those two to play very well in 2024. In the running backs department, I think this is the best 2-headed tandem that West Virginia's had in a very long time. And you call it a triumvirate with Green himself as necessarily a running back, playing the quarterback position in a ways. I still say C.J. Donaldson is your Warhammer. He is the first, second down back. I know if you're playing college football 25 like myself, Jaheim White is ranked equally as 87 overall kind of a player, but just the dynamic that Jaheim White gives you is different than, say, a C.J. Donaldson. The thunder and lightning kind of combination that the two are, I liken them to the dynamics that the Pittsburgh Steelers have with Harris and Warren at running back. And I want to stick with Donaldson for now, but I'll put a pin in that and come back to Jaheim White. C.J. Donaldson played a great season. That's what people forget about with him. 171 attempts for the season, 790 rushing yards, 11 touchdowns. So yes, not over 100 yards per game like some of his counterparts in Ollie Gordon, in Devin Neal in this conference. Even like guys like Taj Brooks down at Texas Tech. But C.J. Donaldson only was able to play. He wasn't able to play in obviously the bowl game, and he tore his labrum on that goal line hit by Danny Stutzman in the Oklahoma game. So for Cincinnati and for Baylor, he was playing with a torn labrum, and he still went out there and took 5 carries. Now, didn't want him to get hit, ran out of bounds, did score a touchdown in one of those 2 contests, and then saved him for the bowl game because West Virginia wanted to go out there, try Jaheim White, and wanted to play another running back whose name escapes me at the top and it's now transferred out. Let me see it here. Oh, DJ Oliver. Sorry. So C.J. Donaldson is the power back. I think we're going to see more performances like the national audience saw in that 2022 Backyard Brawl when he burst onto the scene as a true freshman. He's learning the run. He's now in year 3 at the running back position, fully healthy, fully good to go from the ankle foot injury that he suffered in 2022, the shoulder labrum injury that he suffered in 2023. So he's got to go out there. He's got to protect himself, and his carries need to be managed well. And I think that was one of my biggest concerns, question marks, things that I'm thinking about is how Neal Brown divvies up these carries in 2024. So that's where Jaheim White comes into the equation, is the unique opportunities that Jaheim White has the ball. Because I think Jaheim White, behind Garrett Green, who you hope will do a little more passing and a little less rushing in 2024, at least from a total carry standpoint, but still can be as explosive. Jaheim White is your most explosive player. Let me be clear on that, so you don't get it twisted. Jaheim White is... he's star power mode in Mario Brothers. If you played that game, get the ball in his hands and let him make plays in space. He hits the outside hole so quickly out of an outside zone read run. But the question I have, and this is no knock against Jaheim, it's just the way that the season played out. If you look at his game logs and total carries, he came on strong in those last 6 games of the season. I think there's obviously a correlation that you can draw with this West Virginia offense getting Jaheim White involved more into the game and having more offensive success, more points on the board, winning games. So don't lose that, is what I mean to say is continue to get C.J. Donaldson his carries, but I think that it needs to be effective. Like, again, I'm going to my video game reference, and if you're sick of it, I'm sorry. But when there are times when you're playing, like in my experience, a game, and you've given C.J. Donaldson 2 carries in a row, or he comes up with a big 3rd down run, you give him, you want to spell him, I don't always necessarily want to take the time to hit pause, go to my depth chart, switch the player out for one play. Now, in different packages, you can have that sub, but you get where I'm going with this. That's where, in real time, Neal Brown and Chad Scott need to divvy up these carries well to the play call, to the play design, and then to manage the workload of C.J. Donaldson. So I'm not saying that either player needs to be held back per se, but if a play call in a certain situation, certain down and distance, what the score is, time dictates, we need to have our speed back on the field who can also catch passes. I think Jaheim White's going to be utilized in the pass game, y'all. I really do. I think the way we saw that in that Baylor game and that Cincinnati game, screen passes, we haven't seen too much of H-back screen passes over the Neal Brown tenure. So getting the ball in space in Jaheim White's hands is going to be vitally important. And also, I think he should be part of the return game. If not the kickoff return game, punt return, he should have the ball in his hands and touch the ball double-digit times. But I don't think that he needs to exceed C.J. Donaldson in total carries. So let C.J. Donaldson be the workhorse back. And I think the tandem of 2, when you put them together, is the best. I mean, even with Ollie Gordon, I mean, if you look at the numbers between the 2 of them, You'd have 280 carries between White and Donaldson this past season, 15 touchdowns, and over, 1,600 yards? So put the two of them together as one total running back unit, and I'd put them right up against Ollie Gordon, against Devin Neal, against Taj Brooks. So they're not one single back, but separate the two of them as one rushing unit. There's a reason why this rushing unit finished as the best rushing offense in the Power 4 last year. Power 5 then. So continue that. I think we're going to see more of that in 2024. Jalen Anderson will be a bit of an afterthought, but spell carries here and there. And it's always an insurance policy. I don't necessarily know if we'll get to Dior Hubbard, Trayvon Dunbar. I think they're kind of due for redshirt seasons to then help out this team in 2025. But you never know the way injuries go. So going on to receiver, this is where there was a poll done by WV Sports Illustrated this past week. I know those guys, great guys, do great work over there. Put out a poll that I think was maybe the most interesting question going into 2024 is who emerges as West Virginia's number one receiver? And this is where I don't think that there's a clear-cut answer. Not only because we haven't seen these players on the field, but just the way that it's worked under Neal Brown, that there hasn't ever, in 5 seasons, there hasn't been a clear cut. And it's the way that they're recruiting this position, and that it's the way that the roster has been shaped and developed over this time. Like maybe you could say 2 years ago, Bryce Ford Wheaton was West Virginia's number one receiver, but it's all dependent upon play design, on play call. Similarly, in the way I'm talking about C.J. Donaldson and Jaheim White, it's what in down and distance and the way that the game script has gone, are we going to utilize Hudson Clement, Jaden Bray, Traylon Ray on a go route? Are we going to utilize Preston Fox and Rodney Gallagher in short yardage slot kinds of situations? And is it a kind of way the defense is being dictated to you that for one game Preston Fox is going to eat or Rodney Gallagher is going to eat, but then another game I'm thinking of like Oklahoma State, who's Mike Gundy is going to have press man coverage, zero coverage, and just daring you to burn you over the top, and is out of one game. Jaden Bray or Traylon Ray or Justin Robinson gonna potentially go off, or like Hudson Clement did in the Duquesne game, just a few catches, but bam, we're talking about like 2 or 3 touchdowns on the day and 200 yards. That's what I mean by the wide receiver one. Now, if there's any receiver who I feel like has that type of potential to be a David Sills-like player, a Kevin White-like player, I don't want to say necessarily Stedman Bailey over Tavon Austin out of those kinds of years, because both were great in their own hand and could both be considered wide receiver ones. But I really do think it's Hudson Clement. The way that he came on in those last couple of games at Baylor and then the Duke's Mayo Bowl, it just seemed like there was a comfortable rapport developing between wide receiver and quarterback to the same liking of a Greer to Sills type of way. That he felt confident that Clement was going to make the play no matter where the ball was thrown, and Clement could kind of improvise to Garrett Green to get open. That's what's going to be. That's that sixth sense as a receiver that you can't coach, or as a fan, you can't really, the way the play develops. Like you think back to Johnny Manziel, who Garrett Green was just compared to this past week in type of play and skill set, is that when plays break down, who can have that high football IQ to find open space, to go where you need to go, and can the quarterback hit you in stride? Or on curl routes, in zone coverage, which Clement did a really good job, I feel like, in that Duke's Mayo Bowl, and came up with some really tough contested catches all season long when he was healthy. He had that middle part of the season where he wasn't necessarily healthy, but man, had that catch in the TCU game that his knee really, I feel like barely touched the top of the grass. Had the miracle touchdown against Houston. I think Huddy is going to break out in 2024 and be that that wide receiver one that West Virginia is looking for. It's not to say that I don't have any prospects for Jaden Bray. I really do. And I think he's right there on the cusp. And I think that will develop with time. It's coming. And Cole Taylor was this team's leading receiver this past year at the tight end position. 35 catches, 444 yards, and 4 touchdowns. So working the middle of the field, and the way he's able to break tackles or just jump over you, quite frankly, the best is yet to come for Cole Taylor. But if he gives you what he gave West Virginia in 2023, then that's great. That kid provides more opportunity for some of these other guys to step up. So I like what this wide receiving core has. They're not getting talked about to the likings of, say, Brennan Presley or Rashad Owens, Quentin Skinner, or Lawrence Arnold at Kansas. Of course, McMillan out there, Montana, Lamonius Craig at Arizona. There are some studs in this conference. Dorian Singer at Utah. There are some, but I don't think West Virginia is that close away, but I think that West Virginia's passing attack with the utilization of more up-tempo in 2024, you will see West Virginia ascend to the mean. You always hear the term regress to the mean, but they regressed way like last year because of the tempo, because of the way they schemed in those first 6 games. Like I've said a couple of times on some videos, West Virginia completed the fewest number of passes for a season that it had since the 2007 season under Rich Rodriguez and a whole different type of offense. So I think this is where in 2024 we see, and maybe it's just 4 receivers. So, a Day Farmer, how much does he really get utilized in 2024? Does Rodney Gallagher, is he kind of like on the cusp of really seeing what you would consider as starter reps? Again, the addition of Justin Robinson into this lineup, how does that affect Traylon Ray, I think, most notably? So, to be seen, but I do think 3 to 4 receivers are going to see an ascension in catches than what they saw this past season and yards. So we can look at this passing offense through a different scope, unlike some of the others. Let's flip to the other side of the ball, onto the defensive side. And I think the name most notably to watch for on this defense is going to be Aubrey Burks. Sliding into a new position, I think he is, if you're having oh, wait a second. Come back to the offense. We'll go back to the offense real quick. Talked about quarterbacks, talked about running backs, talked about pass catchers. So I'll conclude that with the tight end position. We kind of know what we're getting at the tight end position. Cole Taylor being more of the receiving tight end, Traylon Davis being more of the blocking tight end. I think more of that will to be seen. I think that Traylon Davis needs to develop softer hands. Some of the opportunities that he had for some easy catches in 2023, he dropped. So he's got to continue to prove that in practice and then translate that over into games to not have some of those drops, to get utilized more, because he's going to be, I think, tight end number 1 come 2025 in his last year of eligibility. Or it's Greg Genross, who might only see a few snaps a game in 2024. So I didn't know necessarily why West Virginia needed him to add him instead of a defensive lineman. Can never have enough of those guys. 300-pounders, big bodies, take a brutal beating over the course of a 12-game regular season. But no, let's stick with what we have after Corey McIntyre tears his ACL in spring camp. So I don't know why West Virginia needed Greg Genross, but if he goes out there and he shows out and makes some plays, I'm thinking like a Giovanni Haskins did in 2018, while Trevon Wesco got a lot of the love at tight end, but Haskins made a few plays here and there. Like that's fine. I'll take that. But Davis, more than competent blocker. Cole Taylor can maybe work side Traylon Davis to do that. I wouldn't mind seeing some 2 tight end sets out of West Virginia this year. I think they could do it. And to get Davis more involved into the passing game, but very low priority item, way low priority. That's evolving this offense to its best capabilities. So we'll see. And then along the offensive line, we know what I feel like we're getting out of Tomas Remack and Wyatt Milam. Milam, in the case, might be the second best tight end behind, or left tackle behind Will Campbell out of LSU, who could be a top 5 overall pick come the NFL draft this upcoming April. So, thinking if as long as Demonic Williams from TCU doesn't eye gouge Wyatt Milam, then he's going to be okay and he's going to stand out. Same with Tomas Remack. I think continues in his development. If he stays healthy, doesn't get cut block or chop blocked by Demonic Williams for TCU, there's a strong side of that offensive line is the left side. At center, right guard, right tackle, that's where there are more question marks. And they're not. I think we just need to see them kinds of things. Is Nick Malone, I feel like, going to be as good as Doug Nestor? No. I think that just proved, not against Nick Malone, it's just how good Doug Nestor was throughout the course of his 3-year career at WVU. At right guard, we saw the way that the rotation working back and forth between Brandon Yates and Jaquay Hubbard. I think it's time for both of them to go out there in their 6th years of eligibility to go prove it. Go prove it over the course of 13 year of a 12-game regular season in your 6th year to go out there and not have to share time between the two of them. Now, this might lead for some opportunities at that backup center position and right guard position if it works for the best sake of both Yates and Jaquay Hubbard to have some spells by Sully Weedman or Nick Cray or Landon Livingston at the center position. I think that's been talked about. There's been a lot of players that are getting some reps at center behind Brandon Yates to get involved. So you don't want to see any injuries potentially happen, but it's a long season. If West Virginia is going to play more snaps than it did in 2024, got to keep these guys fresh for a whole 12 games. They have a really tough schedule, as we've noted. So do some of these backups get involved? I was very, very darn about Kyle Altuner getting injured because, man, it just almost had like flashbacks of Zach Frazier getting thrown out there as a true freshman and trial by fire. And maybe if that opportunity presented itself either at guard or at center for Altuner to go out there and prove himself, but it's going to be Livingston who gets the first crack at it at center, and then either Cray or Weedman at either guard position. But I don't think there's going to be a huge drop-off. So if West Virginia had one of the best offensive line groups in 2023 by its pass protection and road grading standards, and I think, once again, this will be one of the best offensive lines in the Big 12. Maybe not the best. Oklahoma State returning all 5 starters, all in their senior seasons. I know Utah always gets the props for how physical they are. Same with Kansas State. But I think West Virginia can be right there alongside them, maybe just below, having to see how much of a drop-off there is potentially from Zach Frazier to Brandon Yates at center, Doug Nestor to Nick Malone at right tackle. But either way, if I think that this offensive line can be a little more diverse than last season's was, of having to trust in them to road grade every opponent that they had, at least through those first 6 games. If this offense can do a little bit more pass protection, a good job there, Garrett Green can throw the ball, they won't have to be so dependent upon that offensive line to get that great push to provide for its rushing attack to go and lead them over 200 yards per game. So from a grade standpoint, I don't know if last year's offense was an offensive line was an A plus A, are they to an A minus B plus? I don't want to go there necessarily yet, but we will know first game when they're going up against Abdul Carter on one side and Danny Dennis Sutton on the other side in Penn State. So that will be a very tough test. We'll know a lot more here at the end of the month. Now, sorry, I kind of jumped ahead to the defense before talking about the big uglies on the offensive line. Defensively, I really like Aubrey Burks. I think that he really burst onto the scene with some of those PFF grades where he was finishing, in the top 10 in the country at his position 2 seasons ago. Last year, I think, was just marred by that scary head injury that he suffered at TCU. Never really got. I hate this about college football. I wish one of my biggest gripes against college football, let alone the constant booth reviews or automatic ejections for targeting. One of my biggest gripes against college football as a sport, as an entity, is there's no medical reports. It's basically whatever the head coach feels like telling the media, either after the game or at his weekly press conference to preview the game. So if Neal Brown doesn't tell us about it, we're speculating come like an hour ahead of kickoff and whether a guy is in street clothes come pregame warmups. So, again, Aubrey Burks suffers that injury against TCU. I don't know if he was maybe necessarily a little bit hesitant or rushed early back onto the field that West Virginia needed him. Finally, it seemed like came alive there, especially in the Duke's Mayo Bowl, had that exhilarating interception in the end zone that West Virginia desperately needed to keep the game close when they were kind of sputtering in the first half offensively. I don't necessarily understand the move to the spear linebacker. I think he was one of the best free safeties in the country. So why change what isn't broken? But they believe in his abilities to play the run. Even though you had a guy in Anthony Wilson who was second on the team in tackles this past year with 80 for the season in his first full year starting in this West Virginia defense. And he comes away with an interception, had 4 pass breakups, but most importantly, second leading tackler on your team behind Lee Koba. So if you're moving Wilson more to the old free safety spot of Aubrey Burks, who's your center fielder general, I don't necessarily understand this move. I really don't, unless they think that Burks can be the fourth linebacker. And it plays into, I think, what many of you have commented on my defensive video from, I think, like a month or so ago, is that West Virginia is really trying a variation of the 3-3-5 in various different ways by either bringing up the outside previously bandit position linebacker to be a fourth lineman, to then bring a safety, here in this case Burks, up to play as a fourth linebacker, and they're really going with a 4-3. I don't know. At the end of the day, I see it as you have 5 safety or defensive back bodies, you have 3 linebackers on the field, and you have 3 defensive lineman bodies. So however way you want to skin the cat, and I know you can do that with different dynamics and schemes and looks, whether you press the offensive line or back off. Aubrey Burks is a safety to me. He's not going to be a linebacker. But can he play like it at times? Great, and I hope he does. And I hope that it shows off a kind of like a Troy Polamalu type of skill set that will translate to the NFL and get him drafted higher. I hope so by the end of the season. He's a ball hawk, so that's why I don't want to take him out of those coverage responsibilities, because I think it can help to shade a Josiah Jackson or a Kokora Tarnu at this cat safety position. And then, again, Anthony Wilson maybe is 5'8", maybe. So you see that, like in that Hail Mary play against Houston, or some of these other instances, when West Virginia is playing against some of these big-bodied receivers on jump balls, that having Aubrey Burks back there to play center field is helpful. So that will be a very interesting balance. But he really can do it all. Only 48 tackles this past year, so little over half, close to 60% of what Wilson gave you at the safety position. But Played in one game fewer totally, but it's kind of like 1.5 games. Did have 2 picks, 4 pass breakups. This is the money year. This is a money year for Aubrey Burks to go out there, put it all together in his last year of eligibility. And I think he is a player who is deserved of all Big 12 consideration. He's not to the extent of, say, like a Caleb Downs, what you would see at Ohio State, going to be probably the number 1 safety off the board come the NFL draft time, but he does a little bit of everything. He's fast, he's a short tackler, he plays in space, he's rangy. I think that he's going to be West Virginia's best defensive player in 2024, and West Virginia's counting on him. I really liked what I heard staying in the defensive backfield. What I read today by Jim Nagy from the Reese's Senior Bowl. He's the executive director. Big, long post here about Garnet Hollis Jr. Few things in this post that I'll just pull out. That he says that the simple answer on Hollis Jr. is someone with requisite physical traits to match up against the best perimeter receivers in the Big 12, which has been an issue for West Virginia in recent years. Yes and no to that point. I agree with his point about, needing someone to be able to go mano a mano with the Big 12's best. I think Beanie Bishop was able to do it successfully at points in time last year because of his tremendous ball skills. I mean, yes, in the same game, comes away with 2 interceptions, plays phenomenally against UCF, but then Javon Baker, Randy Mosses him in the end zone, and comes down with a touchdown. Yes, J.J. Jones clearly pushed off Beanie Bishop in the Duke's Mayo Bowl game. That's another example, though, that his height, sometimes against some of those bigger receivers, would be a challenge. Why he played a little more off the ball, in zone, was able to come up and, again, make plays, disrupt, and he was so damn physical. I keep referencing the TCU game. I was watching the highlights the other day. He just knocked. He was either a tight end or a wide receiver out. Like Beanie Bishop, Rasul Douglas, Pac-Man Jones, maybe the best 3 cornerbacks that West Virginia's had in the last 20 years. So I hate to see Beanie Bishop go. That's why I was so concerned. I'm so concerned at cornerback 1 is if Aiden Garnes transferring up from the FCS level, can Garnet Hollis Jr. be a true cornerback number 1? That's to this point of Jim Nagy. He was saying when he looked at the early, tape on him coming out for the 2024 draft potentially, that he saw a mid-day 3 grade. To me, that's pretty good. I mean, when we're talking about a 4th through 7th rounder, we're talking about a guy who would have probably went in by that estimation, a 5th or 6th rounder. I'll take that. So now you're getting him better after this 2024 season. I feel much more confident after hearing it from one of the best scouts in the country that he's going to go up against a Brennan Presley, a Teteroa McMillan, a Quentin Skinner, or Lawrence Arnold from Kansas, or Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel from Iowa State, and he's going to go up there and for the entire game. You're this guy's guy. You cover this guy and this guy only, and you wreck him for 4 quarters. And West Virginia can do some things defensively, creatively, with some of the other defensive backs. So that makes me feel like, take a breath of fresh air there, that there won't be this dramatic drop-off at cornerback with the absence of Beanie Bishop. I still think West Virginia's got to figure out at cornerback too. Is it Aiden Garnes? Is it Jacoby Spells? I'm very happy with the progress that he's made since the end of the spring game, when it sounded like, oh no, he might be missing multiple games to start out the 2024 season. Sounds like he's going to be healthy, so he might be CB2 come for week 1 against Penn State. So ultimately, I think this might be the unit across the 5 defensive backs that I have maybe the most concern for going into the preseason. I don't have much concern on any level of the offense. Maybe receiver, again, who's going, to emerge out of that top 3-4 pass catchers. And the defensive backs, I don't know much about Kokora Tarnu. Josiah Jackson didn't play much at all. Let me just look and see here through the official stats. Josiah Jackson had played in one game, had one tackle for the entire 2023 season. So you're trusting him to be a full-time starter, potentially, week 1. That's concerning. So can Aubrey Burks help out there? Can Anthony Wilson continue to be the thumper that he is in the secondary? Can you trust Garnet Hollis? It sounds like Jim Nagy can, to lock down a wide receiver number 1 for opposing offenses and figure it out between Jackson or, say, a Garnes between those 2 other defensive back positions. Let's move ahead to the linebackers. I really liked what I heard, the words out of Josiah Trotter earlier this past week at practice and in his press conference. I think just the few flashes that he showed at the spring game and how he felt not only wanted but needed by West Virginia, and he's here to prove it. So I feel like he's going to be internally motivated to go out there and be just as good as his brother was at Clemson or his dad with the Philadelphia Eagles. I think the sky is the limit for Josiah Trotter, and it can start game 1. Also, I love the depth at this entire linebacking core. Really does go 6 deep. If Ty French is just used as a pass rushing specialist, I'm okay with that. If that means that Tyron Bradley, right alongside Aubrey Burks and Sean Martin, who I'll get to, becomes one of these upperclassmen leaders on the defense, vocal leaders, and then can set the tone, set the standard for how this defense is going to be physical, and they're going to be aggressive, and they're going to rush the passer, Jordan Leslie. And then at middle linebacker, Trey Lathan, if he can pick back up where he left off in that TCU game when he suffered that devastating injury, fly around the ball, and now he's got Josiah Trotter alongside him. Tyron Bradley, a playmaker, can trust those guys. I like what this 3-headed monster at linebacker can give you. Am I going to put it to the level of a Colin Oliver and Nick Martin at Oklahoma State? No. No. I even to the level of like Kobe King and Tony Rojas at Penn State, and Abdul Carter is kind of a hybrid. No. But I think that this linebacking core is going to give you better than what we saw when this position group was wrecked by injuries in 2023. And then Reed Carrico, depth piece. Ben Cutter, depth piece. And then on Ty French, again, depth piece. That West Virginia will be able to rotate some bodies in there. So collectively, this defense is a unit different than I'm looking at from this offense. It's all got to be cohesive. And then the defensive line, Sean Martin's got to have a bounce back year. I think even he would admit that. I think that's been talked about, by Neal Brown as well. That the numbers, 27 tackles, 5 tackles for loss, 1 sack. That's not good enough. That's not going to cut it. West Virginia did it really by committee this past year with its tackles for loss numbers, with its sacks. Lee Koba played really, really well at that middle linebacker. Huge shoes to fill, I feel like, by Trey Lathan. But, Koba had – it's challenging that this middle linebacker position, I think Tony Fields played it as well as – any linebacker that West Virginia's had in a very long time in 2021, you have to do it all. You got to make the calls. You got to be able to not only be a gang tackler, one-on-one tackler that you can trust in the middle, but you can also have to play coverage too. And Lee Koba could not cover to save his life, and was 50-50 sometimes on his pass rushes. 97 tackles. That's what the volume of this position demands. The numbers at the end of the day for Ben Cutter say 13 games played, but we know he didn't really come on as a full-time starter until that Houston game after Trey Lathan got hurt, and he finished 4th on the team in tackles with 56 as a true freshman. So, already talking about the linebackers, defensive line, Sean Martin, if he can stay healthy, unfortunately tried to fight through those injuries to the best of his ability this past season, didn't have the numbers that he would have wanted, but you got more out of Eddie Vesterinen. I can think about the deflection that he had in that UCF game was huge, and was, 4.5 tackles for loss, 3 sacks. I think that he like overachieves, gives you the kind of all-time hustle, engine always running, just to continue to give that to you. Now, I don't think that he's the reincarnation of Chris Neal, really, at the defensive tackle, nose tackle, kind of interior kind of lineman that West Virginia needs. And he's not the kind of pass rusher like, say, a Bruce Irvin, or even to the extent like a Johnny Dingle or Scooter Berry was. But if he can go out there and give you what he gave you from a competitive standpoint from 2023, that's all you can really ask for. And maybe TJ Jackson comes in and supplements to keep Eddie V fresher. I think he, like, the Pro Football Focus numbers on TJ Jackson say he was the best transfer add for this West Virginia defense of the off season. So I'm really curious to see what TJ Jackson gives on either of those outside positions, either spelling Martin, spelling Vesterinen. I think all three guys are going to get their snaps. And then at the defensive tackle position, there's a lot of onus here put on Fatorma Mulba. I gave you those advanced statistics on him at the end of the 2023 season when he got his opportunities. This is why West Virginia felt comfortable with letting Mike Lockhart walk to SMU and enter in Fatorma Mulba, and they're okay with it. They're going to rock and roll, and Hammond Russell is going to come up and rotate in with him. Injury to Corey McIntyre scares me, because Neal Brown likes to rotate those defensive linemen. So if you think Hammond Russell is up to the task, if you think Fatorma Mulba is up to the task, same difference. I'm not expecting Fatorma Mulba to be one of the best, Darius Stills out there. But this is where he's got to maximize on his potential and capitalize. But ultimately, I think this is one of the weaker defensive lines, at least on paper, that West Virginia's had over the course of the last 20 years. Better than some of the dark age teams, I feel like. 2012's the defense that comes to mind like the quickest to me. I don't know. I think they're maybe middle of the pack. I really, really would have liked if West Virginia would have added another guy here, or really went after it and tried to go out there and overspend. The money that they put toward Ryder Burton, Greg Genross, and Justin Robinson, and package that all together and say, I used his name already, I'd have hated to use this, but Dominic Williams from TCU, and go get me some sort of nasty, 300-pound defensive lineman who's going to go out there, stuff the run. That's really ultimately what I want, because I look at some of these running back rooms across that West Virginia is going to face on this schedule. You think of Penn State. Pitt's still going to run the ball. They can't pass the ball, but they're going to try and run the ball with Rodney Hammond. Devin Neal in Kansas, Ollie Gordon in Oklahoma State, Abu Sama in Iowa State, DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards at Kansas State. Arizona doesn't have a run game, but UCF definitely does, and R.J. Harvey. Taj Brooks at the end of the year if he's healthy. I just named for you there how many 1,000-yard rushers from this past year. Nick Singleton, Katron Allen starting it off. So can Sean Martin and maybe that Jordan Leslie and Neal Brown are banking on the idea that if they get a healthy linebacking core that they can be dynamic with between those six linebackers, that all the defense has to do is hold. Has to be like the 300 and just, hold their shields, hold the line, not get pushed back. But this ultimately goes back to my scheme argument that I talked about a few videos ago. But at the end of the day, I think the Tomia Durage transfer hurt more than people, want to admit or even remember. Oh yeah, I remember that guy. And West Virginia, went and replaced him with TJ Jackson, which I'm really curious to see what West Virginia gets out of him, and I really hope for the best. But I think there was an opportunity there late after spring practice, and West Virginia decided to load into, put all the eggs into the basket of the offense, and think we will be so dynamic offensively that we're going to outscore people and just see what we can get defensively, and that's fine. That's fine. I mean, I'm okay with that, and I think that's with my prediction show a week ago. That's how it's going to play out, but I still am cautious because defense travels. Defense can carry you, can win you a game when you don't necessarily expect it to, because offensively you can be inconsistent sometimes. And let's face it, West Virginia was inconsistent at times. Even that Duke's Mayo Bowl game. I thought that West Virginia should have performed much better in that Duke's Mayo Bowl game than what West Virginia got. And it wasn't really until that Beanie Bishop punt return for a touchdown that West Virginia pulled away and could kind of, exhale and feel like this game is definitely in hand, no matter how offensively we play from here on out. And that's kind of what you got. So ultimately with this defense, there's no doubt they're a letter grade differently, at least on paper, from the offense. But I feel a lot better about Hollis Jr., so best player there at cornerback. I think it's confident that he'll be CB1. I like the two tandems between Anthony Wilson and Aubrey Burks. But I'm nervous about that cat safety position and whoever West Virginia has at CB2 to adjust early on. Linebacking core is going to be a bit of a rebuild because of the lack of game experience there, but I think there's a lot of talent. And then on the defensive line, I think we're going to be a bit par of the course. Health with Sean Martin is going to be pivotal, and for him to play to his full potential, does he give you closer to, say, let's think of somebody who was just a little bit above. Well, we'll go back to Johnny Dingle, who was great in those late to mid 2000 years. Or is he going to give you closer to Noble Nakchukwu? I always get that name mixed up, in the mid 2010s. Who was good at times, but that's the varying degrees I feel like for Sean Martin. Is he could be. I don't think he's going to be a Dante Stills, but is he? That maybe that's a good comparison. Can he be as good as Dante Stills was in his last season in Morgantown? I think that's where he should shoot for. Eddie Vesterinen, same kind of difference. I mean, guys, they were on the same team with him, so can they go out there and give it their all like that? And then defensively, on the defensive line, I'm nervous. I'm very nervous. So cohesively as an entire defense, I just hope that West Virginia can do as good, as well as it did in 2023 from a points per game perspective, no matter how it plays out. Be a little more opportunistic to force turnovers, to give the ball back to West Virginia's offense to outscore some people in some close games. So that's what I mean to say. West Virginia, I feel like, has a roster with enough really good players to go out there and contend for a national top 25 ranking. In the ballpark of teams like Iowa, who have a tremendous defense, but a lackluster offense. I said in Iowa or Texas A&M. I think Kansas. I think Arizona. I think North Carolina State. I think West Virginia is right in there with a ballpark. Yes, USC. Yes, Louisville. I've seen them in some of the national polls out there by some pundits. But ultimately, there's not a huge, I feel like, disparity or discrepancy from teams who I feel like are right outside like the top 6 and teams who are around that 25 to 30. Like, some people are saying that Utah is a national top 10 team, and I just don't see it. I just don't, unless Cam Rising picks up right where he left off when he suffered that injury in the Rose Bowl, and he's the panacea to all of Utah's problems by them getting healthy. But I think there's clearly a top 6 in this country, and then there's a lot of teams that have a lot of different question marks across the board. Then there are some teams who you're just relying on what they do in recruiting, what they've done in spending in the transfer portal, and with their name brand recognition that at the end of the day, Florida State, LSU, what they're capable of. So Clemson, can they give it to you? Even Notre Dame, people are having, what are they, 7th in the AP poll? Like, who are they replacing? Audric Estime at running back. They're missing their top 2 tackles, and apparently one of their tackles just got hurt in spring camp or fall camp. So, like, is Riley Leonard going to be the second coming of Ian Book or better? I don't know. I have some concerns there. So the teams who very clearly had a lot of star power coming back and added to in high school and transfer recruiting, makes sense why they're in the top 5, top 6 in the country. Then there's a lot of unknown. And even like a team like West Virginia, who's right on the fringe, top 25 to 30th in the country, is going to go out there and give competitive contests to all the 5 teams that it's supposed to play who are preseason ranked before Halloween. I know I'm a little bit long in the tooth. I'm over an hour. I don't like to go over an hour. I know people don't watch if it's over an hour. So if you've made it this far, man, kudos to you. I appreciate you. Thank you for letting me rant here, and I appreciate you tuning in. So love to hear your thoughts. Where am I right? Where am I wrong? Am I off my rocker? Am I just going crazy? So if you've liked this, please like this video. I really appreciate all the likes, because then that creates that algorithm so that more Mountaineer fans can see it across YouTube, and that's what I'm hoping for. Have now over 300 subscribers. Thank you to all my subscribers out there who are gearing up with me for the 2024 season, and an exciting one that it's going to be. Tell your friends, tell your family, tell your dog that I do this each and every week and have a lot of fun doing it, and I cannot wait for in just about 2 weeks to bring you a preview of West Virginia and Penn State. So for that, we'll take a pause in case there's any more, breaking news in fall camp, like what I'm seeing on social media with some of the competition, the new uniforms that West Virginia is unveiling. So exciting time, and I'll talk to you soon. So thanks for tuning in. Hail West Virginia. Let's go.